I think we should talk a little bit about Mumbai specifically. Now, I
Okay.
think a lot of people should know, but don't know that Mumbai is considered the city of dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I think people should know that? Well, because it's where Bollywood is centered.
Yes.
So for those people who don't know, Mumbai was Bombay.
Yes.
So so
Yes.
Hollywood becomes Bollywood, and
Yeah.
that's where the name comes from. So there
Yeah.
is a celebrity culture there,
Mm-hmm.
which is very important in this case.
Yes.
So, Mumbai, as we have already said, it's a very large city. You are bombarded by people every day, but noise,
Yeah.
pollution,
Yes.
and it is incredibly vibrant. It really does it's like the New York City of India, and I
Yes.
mean that quite literally. It's considered a very similar vibe.
Yeah.
So we do see actors and actresses on the street. It's not
Mm-hmm.
uncommon to see
Nope.
them about their business in Mumbai.
Yeah.
I do think we should talk about the media for a bit because it is well represented in this documentary.
Yes.
And let's just talk a little bit about how media goes in India.
So there's the quote unquote serious media, where you have the serious journalist, serious media reporters who build their reputation on reporting just facts. And then there's everybody else. That's how I think of it. A lot of the media that we see in this case is reporters chasing to get that one bite that will get them famous on air, which again is common, but that might seem a little strange to a lot of people if they're watching this documentary, where they're chasing somebody down the street in an auto rickshaw to catch up to somebody who's on a bike and to interview them in the middle of the street at the traffic light.
Right,
That's
right.
not uncommon.
Not
That does,
uncommon.
yeah,
Not at all.
that does happen because also it's also such a populated country. You have to do something to make yourself stand out, and sometimes you just have to take desperate measures to do that.
Right.
Um,
It's very
so
competitive.
yes, it is. So then you know, just like how it is here, like what channels to watch if you want real journalism, real facts, real reporting, and then what channels you watch if you just want to listen to something, if you don't want something heavy, if you just want to see people interact. It may not be as real, but it might give you a sense of what the public is thinking. So there's like different tiers, like the serious reporting, then there's like the more filler type reporting, and then there's the more junior folks who are just trying to make a place for themselves. And I think we see a little bit of all of that throughout this documentary.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note that unlike, say, in America at this moment in time, there's very much still kind of network TV in India. So
Mm.
what I'm trying to say here is that there is a large segment of the population, usually the elder end of the spectrum,
Hmm.
that watches regular old TV,
Yes.
and they have numerous 24-hour news cycle type channels. They're in
Hmm.
several different languages. So there is a race to provide content.
Yes.
They have no fear in repeating content like in the old days with CNN, where the same story appears like 100 times a day. It is not unusual for broadcasters, TV broadcasters of news, to also be very well known. It is routine in Indian households that there's a TV running at all times. It's not
Yeah.
unusual at all.
Yes.
Remember, we were talking about joint families, so
Yeah.
that means you will have grandparents
Yep.
who are retired and who are listening to the TV all day long.
Yep.
So some family or another will have a TV on in most households. There are many different channels. There's a preference for TV. Newspapers are very much still a thing in Mumbai.
Yes.
People do get newspapers still, and there are several that people read.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a lot of people watching their phones. That does happen.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that was very shocking for a city like Mumbai is that news travels fast
Yeah.
because there's a strong family-oriented,
Community.
community-oriented fabric.
Yes.
News of any kind
Yes.
can travel fast
Yeah.
all throughout the city and at the same time. And there are several apps that people use to communicate with family member groups are
Mm-hmm.
really much is the staple and standard.
Big time.
So one headline in the family group means that 35 people instantly can know the same thing.
Yes.
So news spreads fast and
Mm-hmm.
it can become a phenomenon. So one of the things that this case has as a player is the media itself. It's very
Yes.
critical to understanding a story like this out of Mumbai.
Yes.
Media has a big role to play in people's lives.
Such great points. So these are,
Well, I said, "Gee, thank you."
yeah, I mean,
Every
these
once in a while it happens.
are these are great observations. I didn't even think about how much we rely on print media versus digitized media and having the TV run in the background all day. That is so typical.
Very typical
Yeah.
in every household. I mean,
Yeah.
it is not uncommon for a TV to be running somewhere. Um, so that is a very important thing. People are really tapped in because
Yes.
there are always elders who are watching TV, or a lot of the women of a certain generation do not work. They are
Mhm.
housewives. And so it is electric when a story like this drops. It goes far and wide quick.
Yeah. And
So
we like to believe what we're watching.
there is that.
Yeah. So
There is
it
that.
does
And
it does go
simultaneously believe nothing and have
right.
conspiracy theories. So
Yeah.
that's part of
Yeah.
this whole thing too.
Yeah, with the serious media reporters, you would typically believe them. If it's coming from them, if they have the reputation, you would typically believe that they have the right facts. And a lot of those players are in this documentary.
Absolutely, and in an older generation, they absolutely believe everything that's on there.
Yes. Yeah.
You just can't imagine that someone would bend the facts.
Yeah.
They just straight up believe whatever's on there. So, you spend a lot of time undoing the harm and
Yeah.
trying to say, "No, no, they don't it's not true, don't" you know,
Yeah.
you get into those conversations. Okay,
Yeah.
now, did
Oh,
you have any more points on that? Sorry.
yeah, I just wanted to say that because of the structure of the Indian family, usually the patriarch decides for the household that this is what we're going to believe. So if you're watching the news all day and the patriarch thinks that yes, this is credible, this is believable, the entire household will typically believe it. So it's not just one person
Good
who's
point.
believing it.
Good
Slowly you're
point.
having like big households also starting to buy into the same thing. So it is very hard to undo in a lot of ways.
Which is a great point because one of the key aspects of this case is what is the narrative? So
Yeah.
we'll get to that.
Okay.
Great point. Great point. Okay, so I'm going to jump back to Mumbai.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to just say a couple things. So we have a wealth culture, a success culture, a work culture, and then I thought it would be worth talking about just briefly the college that Sheena was said to have attended. So wealth culture. Let's talk about what would be wealth culture in Mumbai. It is considered that Mumbai is a city of extremes, extreme poverty and extreme wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Extreme wealth would be kind of like what?
Oh, the sky's the limit. You have the Ambani building, which is, I don't even know how many stories, and the number of help is way more than the number of people who reside there.
So the Ambanis are usually on Forbes 500 list of the wealthiest people in the world. They're usually in the top 3, I think.
I think so.
Yeah, they own Reliance, which is an energy company, and many other things, but
Many.
that's the one that they are really known for,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they possess extreme wealth. They're major billionaires, and I guess people should know that they built, what was it, 26 floors, and then they just lived there for, what, a year or something and moved out.
Yeah. But that's like the extreme version of rich. You can basically buy pretty much anything, live whatever lifestyle you want. Generations and generations of those Ambani kids will not have to work their entire life because they're going to have enough money to sustain them.
So, in a nutshell, what we're trying to say is that there are industrialists and others who enjoy extreme wealth, 15 Mercedes, Bentleys lying around, just sitting day
Yep.
in and day out, helicopter pads on the top of the house, pretty much anything and everything you can think of. What we would say is crores of jewelry and gold, which means millions. So you really do have very extreme wealth next to extreme poverty. It is a city of extremes. So you can have a block or two away from Bandstand, for example, which is a part of Mumbai, just a few minutes away, you're in a slum area,
Yeah. Yes.
which is what they're called in Mumbai.
Yeah. And Bandstand is pretty posh and bougie.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's by the water.
Yeah.
2 of the country's most famous actors live there, if not
Right.
more. So, is part of the picture that we need for this case
Mm-hmm.
that there is extreme wealth, there is a daily living style of having servants and drivers. There can be a driver for everybody,
And a
so that
car
means,
for
like,
everybody.
a car for everyone or multiple cars.
Yeah.
The homes can be surprisingly small. The living style, so most people live in flats or apartments.
Yes.
Some people live in bungalows, which is the aspiration of
Mm-hmm.
all. You wanna tell people what, bungalows are?
Sure. They're like standalone houses. It's what we would call a house over here. And it can be two, three, how many ever stories high. So it's outside of a building. It's not a flat on a floor. It's just a separate house.
Right, so we'd call this in America a single family home. These are fairly decent sized standalone homes. They can be probably a few thousand square feet up
Yeah.
to 4,000. They're not usually bigger than that, unless you're in a situation like I was talking of the friend who has multiple
Right.
floors, or like a Shah Rukh Khan who has built up on top of it.
Yeah.
Shah Rukh Khan is a famous actor in Bollywood.
Yeah.
So, where you live is indicative at times of the level of wealth that you enjoy or your family enjoys,
Hmm.
can be a sign of wealth. What neighborhood you're living in, like anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
It's not unusual for people to have multi-generational wealth and stay in the same place that the family has stayed for decades or generations. That's not
Yeah.
unusual.
Yes.
Even if they become super wealthy, they probably will just add property, not necessarily that they'll move out of the family home. In fact, some homes are considered lucky,
Yes.
something for people to know.
Yes.
You can travel from one end to Mumbai to the other if there's no traffic in, what would you say,
An hour and a half, 2 hours?
is that without traffic?
Yeah, without traffic. Oh, yeah.
So, let's talk about really, really quick. And why don't you say it properly, the pronunciation?
Worldly? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
Worli.
right. So it's pretty much in the center of the city, kind of,
Kind of, yeah.
we would say.
Yeah.
We call it townside.
Yes.
Let's talk about that locale. How would you describe it?
It's very expensive real estate. So, one thing about the wealth mindset or the wealth culture in Mumbai specifically is you always want to do more, be better, keep upgrading, so to speak.
Right.
So, if the more you move towards the South Bombay side, which is the town side, the better your reputation or image in society. So, Worli is one of those pockets where if you own a home, it automatically associates a lot with your family reputation. It means that you're rich. It can also mean that you're cultured and you're sophisticated,
Well traveled.
well traveled. There's so much that goes with it. It can also mean that you're a professional. It just means that you have a lot of wealth. So, Worli is one of those pockets. Again, it has a sea facing view. So, it's one of those pockets that can be pretty expensive to live in.
Yeah, absolutely. And people are considered to be well educated, probably
Yes.
foreign educated, would possess some of the better positions career-wise, working for the best companies,
Yes.
the elite companies. And when you're talking about town, what we're really talking about is the oldest part of Mumbai
Mm-hmm.
that existed. There's a lot of British colonial buildings in town,
Yeah.
governmental buildings.
Yes.
So, but Orly is a place known to be a desirable, an aspirational location. So I
Yeah.
think that's very important to understand.
Yes.
Rahul and Sheena end up in Andheri, which is not considered to be the most affluent area. It's more transient, it's younger.
Mm.
So a lot of the movie industry is also in that area, like people who wanna be actors, like wannabe actors and actresses.
Yeah.
It's gentrifying, but we could easily say that this was the more middle class or lower middle
Yeah.
class kind of area, correct?
Yep. There's so much associated with East and West, like how you have
Right,
New York City, you have the Upper West Side, you have the Lower East Side, the Upper East Side. So there's always this rivalry about which side is better. So
exactly.
if you're residing in the East Side, it might mean that you're poorer than somebody who resides on the West Side of Andheri. It's like the backyard of more affluent areas to live in. So if you can't afford a neighborhood like Bandra or Juhu, then you might go further out and keep going further out until you reach a place where you can afford property. So Andheri might be, for some people, adjacent to an affluent neighborhood, but not an affluent neighborhood in itself.
Right, right. And by the way, it's very easy to travel to any of these places. It'll only take you time.
Yes.
Getting around Mumbai is very much an easy thing.
Yes.
And one thing I don't want to forget to mention is we're going to talk about getting out of Mumbai and because of the body dump location.
Yes.
So we talked about wealth culture. So there's also success culture, which you were just discussing, which is in Mumbai, it's always what's next. Got this far, what's next?
Yeah.
It is around the clock city.
Yes.
And success culture and work culture are obviously very interlinked here, very connected.
Mhm.
It is not unusual for people to work long, hard hours in positions.
Yeah.
It is not unusual for people to work during the weekend, and a lot of people have 6-day work weeks.
Yep. It's
It is
expected.
not It is expected
Yep.
in most positions, and if you're able to get off a weekend, then you must be working for a company that's a multinational. Work culture is here is very important because of Indrani herself and
Yes.
the kind of marriage she was enjoying with Peter. It is a nonstop city. This is a city that doesn't sleep. You can have anything delivered to your home. You
Yeah.
imagine what it is, and it can be delivered to your home, which is including obviously food. You can have your furniture upholstered at home.
Yeah.
You'll have an egg guy, a bread guy, a
Yeah.
vegetable guy, a fruit guy, you name it, fish guy.
Yeah.
All the stuff gets delivered. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it's a very much a very hardworking community, and the people do prioritize work. Work
Hmm.
is considered very important given the fact that poverty is right there in front of you. You pass poverty every single day, meet poverty on the streets every single day. It has an impact, and one of the impacts is that people work very hard, very long hours, and at any time of day. You will meet people who have multiple phones, answering them consistently and continually.
Yep.
You are on call.
Yep. You're wired in.
Sunday is the one day that people are way more relaxed, considered very much a sacred family day.
Yeah.
If work has to happen, work has to happen, and so
Yeah.
it is a city of workaholics, I would say.
Yeah. That is the norm. No matter how rich you are, if you're not someone who works 70 to 80 hours a week, you're not a professional, you're not smart, you're not respected, no matter how rich you are.
Yeah. So the wealthy in a city like Mumbai, it is not unusual for them to actually have their nose to the grindstone. It's not like they are getting all this wealth and really not doing much. It's not
Right.
like it doesn't happen ever. I'm not going to say that,
Right.
but it is part of Indian life that work is almost like a god itself,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody values and honors it because it's how the whole system functions.
Yeah.
So there will be people who will contact you 10, 11 at night, asking you questions about business, like customers. It could be anything, colleagues exchanging information. So I think that's very important in this case. We're looking at a power couple,
Yeah.
and they're not sitting back.
No.
This all relates to the success. It's
Yeah.
always more, better, higher,
Yeah. And even
right?
when Indrani says I would just sleep 3 hours a night, I've spent more than 36 hours in the office. I've not gone home in the night. And that's normal. They'll give you a little bit of leeway, but if that's what you have to do, then that's what you have to do.
Right. So that is to say that there's a certain kind of pace and
Yes.
work ethic, and respectability comes a lot from people who have drive,
Yes.
right? Okay, so now let's talk about Saint Xavier. Now, this kind of plays a role in this story. What is Saint Xavier?
It is a college in town. It's famous. It's one of those colleges where you really strive to get into.
You mean it's like an exam school type, or
An exam school?
like you have to qualify, you have to take an
Yes.
exam?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
It's competitive.
It's competitive. You get admission based on merit, based on how you do in like a GED or SAT type exam.
Okay,
Uh,
so we're bringing this up because this is where Sheena went.
yes.
And so it's in town.
Yes.
How expensive is it?
Yeah. So college in India is pretty cheap. So when I went to college, I think I paid around 250 rupees, which is $4, $5 for the entire year.
Right. Well, I do know that tuitions have gone up, but
Yes.
during Sheena's time here, they still would have been within reason.
Yeah, they would have been
Yeah.
pretty cheap. Uh,
Yes.
and that's for the entire year. It's manageable.
And what kind of people go to St. Xavier? Is this co-ed? Is it considered in the city a reputable school?
It is co-ed.
So I just want to put this in perspective for folks. If we're to take Indrani's word that Sheena was very bright, is this the best school she could have gone to in town?
I would think so.
Okay, and she got a bachelor's of arts,
Yes.
right? So some of the schools are divided, right, in terms of what you study,
Yes, they are. Certain schools are better known for certain degrees.
right? So this is not like an exclusive prep school type of atmosphere.
No,
Right. It's not a top of the line costing thousands of dollars
no,
or yes.
no.
So it's a good school, a solid school,
Yes.
a reputable school, and a fairly inexpensive school, which is not to take anything away from it. I mean, I'm
Right.
not trying to say that. I'm
Right.
just trying to say that it doesn't break someone's back to send their son or daughter there.
No.
Okay.
It,
So I just wanted to give an idea about something that Sheena would be involved in, what her life could have been like, what was going on for her by
mhm.
giving an idea of where she had gone to school and give its place in the spectrum of educational opportunity.
Yes.
Um, the other thing that I thought was kind of important to talk about as relates to this case is the technology at the time. We're
Hmm.
looking at 2012. While India is pretty cutting edge on a lot of things related to
Yes.
tech, as people probably imagine, lots of engineers, lots of
Mhm.
tech people in India. There were a few things that were a little bit behind the times, I would say. For example, I think one of the issues in here is that, we're talking about cell phones, right? And availability of cell phone reports. So in this case, we have a lot of technology happening, email accounts.
Yes.
Now, what might not be understood to people who are interested in this case, who don't know a lot about India and technology that's happening there, you definitely could get call records, right? But the retrieval systems aren't necessarily what we've become accustomed to, particularly in 2012.
Yes.
I think the other thing to point out and is that it was possible to go into a shop and get a phone number under a false name.
Yeah.
It was not difficult at all if people wanted to do that.
Stop
Um,
stealing thoughts out of my head. I
I'm
just had
reading
that
your
vision.
mind.
Yeah, I just had that vision of going into a store and just getting a random burner phone without much
Right.
effort. It's
So I
easy.
guess what I'm trying to get to is I'm trying to talk about the technology here because we're going to be later discussing about the idea of actually going missing and what can happen in terms of proving the digital evidence in this case.
Right.
Is there anything that you want to add right here?
At one point, cell phones were really expensive when they just came to India. But I think around the time that this crime happened, 2012, it was really easy to buy a cheap phone without a lot of investment, very easy to activate your SIM card and just start using it.
Absolutely. There are thousands of shops in
Yes.
Mumbai. This
Yeah.
is not a hard thing. There's such a thing as an authorized dealer, so no real tracking mechanism. Anybody could just walk up to any one of these authorized dealer people who are
Yes.
not necessarily a part of the official, like here we would have AT&T where there's an official shop. They're just authorized dealers.
Right.
So they're not so meticulous. They're not so concerned about presenting IDs.
No.
Um, there was a time where you could get a SIM card without even an ID, just for perspective.
Yeah.
The other thing is that there was a period of time where the records were not very clear. They didn't really specify who you got a text message from.
Hmm.
Still in 2012, a lot of people are on Facebook. A lot of people.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
I think we did have WhatsApp. In fact, I think India was a bigger adopter of WhatsApp than the US even at that time.
Yes. Even now, I think.
Texting was a big thing in India from the
Yeah.
very beginning because people didn't want to make phone calls because they cost more money. So
Yes.
back in the day, everybody texted, your grandparents,
Yeah.
anybody. It was a
Yes.
very common way of communicating. This also helped relationships among couples who were trying to keep their relationships away
Yeah,
from others in
true.
secret.
Yes, yeah. And no matter how rich or poor you were, you could buy a cell phone. So it was really easy to own that cell phone and text and be under the radar.
And also important to note that it is not uncommon for folks to ask to borrow
Oh,
servants'
yeah.
phones, drivers'
Mm,
phones.
yes.
It's a very common thing. It's also common to put company names to hide assets in servants' names. So you could just tell your driver, go get me a phone number.
Yes.
They would put it in their name. So all of this can happen. Very common for people to have their GPS on. Most
Yes.
people do.
Yes.
Lots of towers, lots of cell towers. People in India were on their phone in 2012 far more than people in the United States. I can tell you that because I traveled back and forth. Cell phones were a must have. And
Yeah.
even if you were poor, you had a phone,
Yep.
a prepaid phone. So that's another thing that needs to be said is that it's very easy to have a prepaid phone, always has been, will always be.
Yeah.
So that is something else that is, I think, worthy of note. Okay,
Yeah.
so I think that is a very lengthy, or let's be nicer, comprehensive of it's a little mini capsule
Yep.
about life in India and some of the things that affected this case.
Yep. Yeah. That was a good recap.